we were in Hawaii at the Honolulu temple, and I was making deities. And he had spent a great deal of time explaining how he wanted the Gornitai deities made, and there was a devotee sculptor there, one of his disciples who was a sculptor. And he gave us elaborate instructions of what to do, and after all of his elaborate instructions, the sculptor devotee asked, my wife would like to make silk, but in order to make silk you have to kill the silkworms. So is this okay? And so Srila Prabhupada, I don't actually recall what he said about the silk, but after this devotee left, he expressed that he was annoyed because that he was giving one instruction, and next, instead, there was a talk of making silk, and he said, these Western disciples, they are so creative. Next, they will be asking me if they can kill cows to make mridungas.
There was one morning the devotees were complaining to me about the diet, and that they wanted more fruit and more. These were the American, European, the Westerners, and they were saying, look, because the diet in Vrindavan at the time was chapatis and khichdi in the morning, and at lunch it was chapati, dal, rice, and I think a sabji. So they were thinking, look, we're getting, we need to get some fruit and some other things. But you don't. I had already learned you don't change anything to start, right? I wasn't going there. I wasn't ruining a good thing. And so I went to Prabhupada, and I said, Srila Prabhupada, the devotees are requesting that they want some fruit and some other things in the diet. He says, Prabhupada said to me, we're grain eaters. He said, humans are grain eaters. If they want to eat fruit, then that's all they should eat. So don't change it. So I didn't, that was as far as that went. We're grain eaters. I was happy because I just loved, the chapatis and khichdi in Vrindavan were the best. You had fresh, hot chapatis, just a little burnt, and the khichdi was, the prasadam was delicious in Vrindavan.
Srila Prabhupada gave classes each morning in the Frederick Street Temple, and would always ask for questions at the end of the class. But he wanted questions that were relevant. One morning, I wanted to hear the story of Lord Chaitanya falling in the water. It wasn't really relevant to the class, so I was kind of shy about asking it. But anyway, I raised my hand and I asked, I said, well, this isn't really relevant, but could you please tell the story about Lord Chaitanya falling into the water? And Prabhupada went into ecstasy. I didn't know what was going on. He became totally quiet for about 5 minutes. And I was like, oh gosh, what have I done wrong now? I was really worried. And then he came out and he said, yes. And he told the story of Lord Chaitanya falling in the water. And afterwards, all the devotees were saying, didn't you see there were tears running down his face? Tears were coming down, and he was completely in ecstasy. And I marveled on that, and I began to see that here he's in the Western world, and Western children, we were just like children to him, were asking him about Lord Chaitanya, and it gave him great pleasure. It gave him great joy.
Now, from the ride from L.A. to Laguna Beach, Jayatirtha drove with Prabhupada. Prabhupada and maybe, I don't know who else was in the car. I wasn't in the car going to Laguna Beach. Anyhow, Jayatirtha was falling asleep the whole way. And Prabhupada wasn't going to let him drive from Laguna Beach to San Diego. No way. So Jayatirtha approaches me that I should drive the car with Prabhupada. I think it was a Mercedes. Anyhow, so I was like, really feeling this is really great, and I was feeling like really, yeah, this is really great. This is a rare opportunity. I was going to be in the car with just Jayatirtha, and I think maybe it was Brahmananda or maybe it was Tamal Krishna Goswami. Anyhow, can't remember. But in those days, we hardly slept. I mean, to stay awake in Bhagavatam class, I know the only way I ever stayed awake is I exercised my temple president privilege and fanned Prabhupada the whole time so I could stand. That was how I did it. So anyhow, so I was just as tired as everybody else. We were on the road. And so we're traveling, and it's not far from Laguna Beach, San Diego, about an hour's drive. And my eyes are like, ugh, you know, and I'm like, I can't open the window or anything. So anyhow, so I'm looking in the mirror, and I'm looking in the mirror, and Prabhupada's got his head back, and Prabhupada's asleep. And a little bit later, I look in the mirror, and who else was sitting in the back seat with Prabhupada? I think it was Brahmananda. He was asleep. And then a little bit later, I look over to Jayatirtha, who was riding in the shotgun seat, and he's asleep. So I'm the only one awake in the whole car. And I'm going like this, and I'm holding my eyes, and I'm just dying to fall asleep. And I can't roll down the window. I can't turn on the radio. I can't chant japa aloud or anything. So I'm just like struggling with this whole thing, and I'm there because Prabhupada wanted to feel safe, and I'm doing this, and then I hear from the back of the seat of the car, and Prabhupada starts a kirtan. And then just everybody in the car gradually wakes up, and we had this really wonderful, just the four of us in the car, this kirtan on the way to San Diego. He saved me. I'd probably fall asleep, killed us all. But just at the, like at the darkest hour of when my eyes just wouldn't, just this soft clapping started in the back, and he started a kirtan.
When Prabhupada arrived in London one time, my father drove him from the Pradumna and Shamsunda, I believe. So we came down right near the, right alongside the British Museum. There's a 3-lane road that goes all the way down the side of the British Museum as you're going down towards Bury Place at Holborn. And there's a hospital on one side and the British Museum on the other. And there's no pavement, there's just 3 lanes of road straight down there, so nowhere to go. And we were in the middle lane, and there were 2 red double-decker buses in the outside lanes. And as we were coming up on them, they closed in on us. And they almost closed right in on the car. It was very dangerous. And my father spontaneously screams, "Haribo!" and slammed down on the gas pedal, and the car just took off through the gap, and the buses pulled apart as we went through. And Prabhupada turned to my father and he beamed at him. And years later, my father wrote me a letter and he said, "Remember when I was driving Swamiji from the airport and those buses were closing in on us?" He said, "And I screamed, 'Hari Bol.'" He said, "And the buses parted, just like the waves of the Red Sea parted for the Lord." So it was very nice, because my father, he equated that experience of the buses parting when he screamed Hari Bol to the parting of the Red Sea, which was, for me, something special.
One very significant thing happened in Boston in 1968. We had a new Back to Godhead. And it had I think it was in May, because we were in Boston in May of '68. This particular Back to Godhead had an ad on the back cover. It looked very slick, at least graphics for those days. And it had a picture of Prabhupada, black and white, and said, "This man changed the world." It looked pretty slick. Prabhupada called me in his room and handed it to me and said, "Look at this." And I was like, okay. I'm looking at it. What's wrong with it? And he said, "This is very bad. This is very serious. A spiritual master should never be referred to as a man. This is the beginning of fall down. This consciousness to view the spiritual master as an ordinary man as a man, to even call him a man. This is the beginning of fall now. Call Rai Rama. Rai Rama was responsible, I think, Rai Rama, Jayadvaita, there were several in Boston at that time. Rai Rama was in charge, I believe. I'm not really sure of the person responsible for it, but I think it was Rai Rama. In any case, that's not the issue. The issue is that Prabhupada was very, very seriously affected by this. And his explanation was that one should never, ever refer to or consider the spiritual master on the level of a man.